is when I'm beginning to think, well, this, maybe I'm going to have to look for another job here or something. And I said, well, how's it going? What else do you say? How's it going? And he said, now instead of paying them $100 for sex, he said, this gospel has so liberated my heart and given me confidence. He said, I saw those girls through different eyes. I saw them as holy. I saw them as righteous. I saw them as perfect in the eyes of God. And he said, I started telling them that. And when I would lay down my $100 bill and they'd start to take off their clothes, he said, I'd tell them, you don't have to take off your clothes. I want 1 hour of your time. And he started paying $100 for an hour each weekend to take one prostitute and share the gospel with her. Dramatic impact into this guy's life. And not only did he stop buying prostitutes, he used the same money, kept doing the same thing, and it all turned into something where he was sharing good news with these people who have such low self-esteem that they would be out there in such a situation. When we look at this, though, Paul had some statements to make at the front of this. One is Paul's testimony. Do you know what Paul was converted from? How many of you have looked at Paul's testimony? Do you know what Paul said? Paul said that he had been converted from the righteousness which is of the law to the righteousness which is of the faith of Jesus Christ. You see, when we look at conversion, how many of you have been in churches and they have altar calls for people to come forward to be converted, right? What are they being converted from?
Condemnation.
They're being converted from something that's condemning them. They're being converted from sex, drugs, rock and roll. I'm giving up this, and this. I used to be a bad person. I've come to the altar to become a good person. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, the man who has his testimony recorded 3 times in the New Testament, he has a very powerful testimony. Do you know he not once said that his conversion was from even being a murderer? Or that his conversion was from doing bad? In fact, he said that he was a Pharisee of Pharisees and is touching the law blameless. But he said, what I have been converted from and to, I have been converted from my own righteousness, which is of the law, to the righteousness which is of God, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. Self-righteousness will never let you know the power of Christ or the power of his resurrection. When we begin to apprehend and conceive of the righteousness that is of God through the power of Jesus Christ, that's the moment a process begins. Not to try to make you a good person, but a process begins to make you a whole person. In spite of your actions and deeds. The gospel is there to help your heart to become whole, regardless of what kind of person you have, a perception you have of what kind of person you are. And it's that process of wholeness of heart. Then what's a whole heart? A whole heart is one who knows that they are accepted by God. Now, I want to read you a list. Now this list, this is before this. I want to back up from this Romans chapter 3, verse 19. And Paul is talking about people, and this whole book of Romans is a comparison not between the unrighteous and the righteous. You can read all the way through the book of Romans. That is not what this book is about. This comparison is between the self-righteous and the righteous. And the fruit of that. Now listen to what he says. In the conclusion of chapter 3 in verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. Now if they weren't righteous in this comparison, what were they? They were self-righteous. Because what were they trying to be righteous through? This is where they were trying to be righteous through the law. Now, he says, there is none righteous, no, not one. So the default is that they were self-righteous people trying to enact their own righteousness through the law. There is none that understandeth. Wow. What is the very first thing that a self-righteous person does not have? Understanding. There is no understanding of truth in self-righteousness. He says, there is no understanding. There is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way. Now, I know that you read this, and it was those pimps and prostitutes out on the road that we were talking about. But when you see what the fruit of this is and who it's applicable to, it is amazing. He says, they are all gone out of the way. They have altogether become unprofitable. Unprofitable for what? The sharing of the gospel. Why? Because they are existing in and preaching self-righteousness. And there's no profit in it. Well, there's profit for their wallet, but not profit for the people. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Were they trying to do good? Yes, through the law. Their throat is an open sepulchre. Now remember, we're talking about self-righteous people. Their throat is an open sepulchre, and with their tongues they use deceit. Folks, some of the most deceitful people I've ever been around is self-righteous Christians. The poison of asp is under their lips, whose mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Now we think of cursing, we think about the guys at the bar using all these expletives. But do you know what this means? Their mouth is full of cursings. It literally means that they are approaching heaven with an interrogation, expecting a negative response. And you can hear it in preachers on TV all day. Do you actually think God can bless you if you're doing that? That's an interrogation of heaven, folks. And do you know what they're expecting? A negative response. Do you actually think that while you're not tithing, that God can help you? They're interrogating heaven. And you know what the expected answer is, don't you? They fully expect that they know the answer. But the fact of it is, the answer is contrary to that. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Wow. Whose feet? The people at the bar and the club? The self-righteous. Folks, I tell you what, we have gone through this so many times. I don't know how many of you have ever seen Reverend Felt's ministry. The one where he goes around and he pickets the funerals of gay people and also everybody who's died in the military in fighting in Iraq. Have you ever heard anything more hateful and bitter in your life? Do you know that he is saying that right here that their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their way. How many of you have ever come out of church miserable? And the way of peace they have not known. What way of peace? They do not know that God has united himself with the people they condemn. They do not know. There's a place in northern Africa, an entire ministry that is based on the law of Moses. Do you know what they do? They murder people every night. Children are on the move because of these wandering marauders of God's law, believing that it is their purpose to go out and execute punishment and slaughtering women and children because they base all of their doctrine on the laws of God. And the way of peace they have not known. Wow. Now, Paul, on the other hand, said that the fruit of the Spirit is the fruit of God's righteousness. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, faith, patience, and temperance. One of those means self-control. Self-control. I never will forget the first time I got up and taught on the fruit of self-control. I ask people, how many of you ever, just like we started this session, how many of you have ever stood up and gave God control over your life? How many of you have given Him control over your life? Well, I'm sorry, He's not going to take control over your life. Why would a God who would create and give to us a gospel, a Savior, a Redeemer, a redemption that would give us a spirit or a fruit called self-control if He wanted control? You have complete control over your life because you have been set free from the self-righteousness and the destruction of it. You're the one that makes the decisions. Like President Bush says, I'm the decider. You're the decider, okay? You're the one who decides what to do about life. You say, well, what's going to rule my heart? What's going to direct me? You see, that's where that I detest what evangelical Christianity has done to your heart. They have caused you to be and undermined your heart, that it's something that you cannot trust your own heart. Folks, you got a new heart. It's placed there by the power of the Spirit. And it is time that we begin to help you trust your own heart. It is time that we begin to help you to embrace that even though the road to embrace your own heart and to follow your heart is a bumpy path. Folks, you cannot. It's just like the people moving out of communism into freedom. Was that a smooth transition? Anytime you go out of bondage into freedom, the transition is not a smooth transition. These folks went hungry because the communists that had them in bondage, there was nobody making food anymore. There was nothing was happening. They were just left with nothingness. And there's so many people that have heard this gospel who've come to that point to say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what to do with my life anymore. But just because you don't know what to do with your life anymore does not mean that you ought to go back to the bondage you were in. It's better to not know what to do for a little while than to do something that's going to take you directly back into the oppressive belief system that you were once in. Now, folks, the people that preach and teach this are not people that are bad people. They're misinformed people. Because their comparisons are coming from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. My comparisons are coming from the cross. The other tree. The tree that destroyed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Totally nailed it to His tree and did away with that form of thinking in relationship to God. Your relationship with God is perfect. My job is to help you become aware of just how perfect it really is. Good news? That's good news.